You're listening to the Common Descent Podcast. Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to Silver Screen Science, the series where we talk about the science of movies.
Yeah.
Not just nitpicking stuff, but talking about how science fits into movies, how movies treat science. Where is that crossover between science and pop culture? Today, we're doing a weird one.
Very weird one.
This episode is about the animals of the James Bond franchise.
You didn't see that one coming.
No, because that's a very strange choice. We'll explain a bit more about what exactly we mean in a moment. But first, the reason that we're doing Silver Screen Science this time of the year is because we're stuck at home trying not to be part of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we know a lot of our listeners are as well, which is a good time to watch movies, listen to podcasts, and for us to make more podcast stuff.
Yeah.
It also means that we've been watching lots of movies.
A bit.
Now, originally, our James Bond movie watching was completely unrelated to the podcast.
No, just personally, we decided to do it.
We're going to watch through the James Bond franchise. And we did.
Yes.
And as we were going through, there's science in the James Bond franchise. There are scientists, there's like mad science and physics and chemistry and space and all sorts of stuff. But none of that really was enough meat for us to make an episode of Silver Screen Science for our podcast.
Yeah, neither of us are quite specialized in all of those things.
But the one thing we found ourselves consistently commenting on was the way that animals are used in the Bond movies.
Mm-hmm.
So this episode, we are going to talk about that. We'll touch on what animals show up, how they are represented accurately versus not. Also, we found ourselves talking a lot about how the animals were treated.
Yeah.
Like, personally treated.
Yeah, like as individuals.
So we'll talk about all that kind of stuff. It's a break from our normal format where we talk about science and concepts and scientists. This is just animals, because if we were talking about science in the Bond franchise, we would be here forever.
Oh, there's no end.
Also, most of it's not in our wheelhouse, like you said. For the uninitiated, James Bond is a fictional character who is a secret agent in the British Secret Service. Originally featured in a series of novels by Sir Ian Fleming, Bond has made many, many appearances in film, mostly through Eon Films.
Yes.
Their first Bond film was Dr. No in 1962. Their latest actually comes out this year, but originally it was supposed to be out this month, April, and it is not because of the pandemic. So that one we'll see some other time. There are 24 movies spanning 6 decades in this franchise. We watched all 24 of them. Each one is Bond is the secret agent, and there's some bad guys doing some bad stuff, and he goes to places and he meets people, and he treats various humans and bad guys and animals and women in various questionable ways. And there's all sorts of hijinks that happen. Sometimes it's super serious and spy thrillery. Other times it's high camp, and sometimes it's just plain not worth watching. We also watched the most famous Bond film that is not part of the Eon Films franchise, which was Never Say Never Again in 1983. There are also 2 other Bond movies, both adaptations of Casino Royale, one in the 50s, which was a TV thing, and one in the 60s, which was a satire thing. We did not watch those, so if there are any Bond purists out there, sorry. Yeah, we didn't get to this. So, as always, this is your spoiler warning. This episode may contain minor spoilers for as many as 25 movies.
Yes.
So,
we're going for a record this time.
most of what we're going to talk about I don't think is actually very plot significant.
No, I mean, like other than letting you know what happens in certain scenes, it's not going to ruin what happens to, like, the bad guy.
So, over the course of the franchise, there are several instances where animals show up for various reasons related to the plot of the movie, oftentimes as part of the villainous schemes or in the background or setting the scene or whatever. But the movie that made us want to do this episode when we were going through was 1973's Live and Let Die.
Yeah.
because it is the first film in the franchise to feature Crocs and snakes.
Yeah.
And there's actually a bunch to talk about with those. So we're just going to go animal by animal, kind of, starting with Crocs. Will?
So this movie has a scene where the bad guys take Bond to an alligator farm in Louisiana.
Which is a real thing.
Which is, yeah, like, it's a very normal looking alligator farm. And the whole thing is that it's like they've set up base at this old alligator farm and they are going to feed him, leave him to be eaten.
Right. The classic, we're going to leave you out there and then not actually pay attention to what happens.
Exactly.
And then walk away and assume it all goes according to plan.
Which is pretty, par for the course. Yeah, you got big toothy animals, feed the good guy to them. But the part that got us interested is as the bad guy is walking Bond out to the pond where they're going to leave him, he's throwing some chicken to the Crocs and the gators in the pond and points at them. And he says, now you see that one? That's a crocodile. You can tell because of the narrow snout.
Yeah.
Alligators have rounder snouts. And he throws a piece of chicken to an alligator. And they also were American alligators and American crocodiles.
Which, if you're in Louisiana,
you could have.
Seems reasonable.
So having those two at an alligator farm in Louisiana and correctly identifying how to differentiate them was not what I was expecting.
No, that was the first thing that made us go, oh, yeah, no, this could be an episode.
Yes.
Because that's really, they did a good job with the crocodilians.
And the rest of that scene, I mean, there's a couple of parts where, like, they leave him out on a little island, and then the alligators and crocs start slowly coming up on the island, and it's suggested, like, maybe they're coming for him, but there's also a lot of chicken left on the island.
Right.
And, like, in reality, they're coming up for the chicken.
And they're not lunging or attacking or doing anything particularly movie monstery.
They're just slowly coming a little closer to this new person in their habitat.
Which seems like a thing they would do.
Yep. So it's not that bad. The worst part of the scene is that Bond gets out of it by running on the backs of 3 crocodiles.
I can see why they thought that would be cool.
And they were actually crocodiles.
Yeah, no, it's not like they made rubber versions for him to run on.
No, they tied down 3 crocodiles so that they were just below the water and you couldn't see the ties. And then they had a stunt guy run across their backs.
Yeah.
Which isn't great.
And again, a theme that you'll see as we go through this. A lot of these movies were made in the 60s and 70s.
Before Milo and Otis.
So there is a lot of questionable animal treatment. Now, I believe I've read that scene, when they were filming it, there was a moment where the stunt guy fell.
Yeah, like, I've seen the clips of their multiple takes of that scene, and in one of them, he trips and lands on one of the crocodiles.
Yep.
And the crocodile is just, like, mouth open, like, going back and forth, waiting for him to get close enough, and he just slowly reorients himself and then hops onto the land.
Which is why we don't do that, movie makers.
Yep.
So, starting off actually fairly well.
Yeah.
With Crocs. Crocs appear in only one other movie in the franchise, and that was in 1983's Octopussy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they were gators?
Yeah, they're supposed to be in India, but they use an American alligator.
So what should it be in India?
So in India, you would either have it be a mugger croc or saltwater croc.
Right.
So like the Australian saltwater croc, they range all the way up to southern India. So depending on where he was, but it should have been a mugger.
So you used an alligator.
Yeah.
And then I think they attack a person. Like someone falls in the water and they are implied to attack the person.
Yeah, well, he fights with a guy and they fall into the water and the guy gets eaten, but Bond conveniently escapes in his croc sub.
Yes, so there is a Robo-Croc.
Robo-Croc.
Which I think makes up for the alligator in India thing.
Yep.
Because that's the kind of movie that one is. So, 2 appearances for crocodilians, but...
not terrible.
Yeah, like B+.
Using alligators in place of crocodiles, I can't count how many TV shows I've seen do. Like, going to another country is expensive, and then getting area-accurate animals I'm sure is even more expensive, and alligators are much easier to work with.
Right. So
than crocodiles.
It's a reasonable compromise.
So I get it.
Snakes appear in several of these movies.
Yes, they do.
And they are significantly less good.
Yeah, they're not quite handled as well.
Man, it's just, we had talked about this. The snakes are monsterified in the way that the Crocs aren't, and I think it's because you don't need to monsterify a Croc.
No, what do you need to make up about a Croc? And if you are making up, you don't know enough about Crocs. You should have talked to someone.
So the first movie that we get a bunch of snake appearances was Live and Let Die.
Mm-hmm.
Same film. They're down in Louisiana, so, they're closer to the tropics and you get reptiles and stuff.
Yep.
There are 3 scenes that feature snakes prominently in this movie. All 3 times they are implied to be dangerous because they are venomous.
Yes, like they're all supposed to be that if this thing bites you, you're done for.
Snakes are used in this ceremony where I guess they're making sacrifices.
Yeah, it's supposed
like
to be
the
voodoo.
Locals are doing. This is not a podcast about the cultural representations in the Bond franchise. Then there's a snake that is put in Bond's hotel room to attack him.
Yep, they're like, it's that classic, I'm going to just slip this animal in here and surely it will kill the good guy.
And then one of the bad guys falls into a coffin full of snakes.
At the same ceremony site later on.
Now, all 3 times the implication is they're snakes. If they bite you, you're going to die. The snake used in the ceremony appears to be some kind of tree python.
Yes.
Like green tree or emerald tree python. And the snake that's left in Bond's room is a king snake.
Yeah.
It's not harmful.
No.
And that means that king snake did not deserve the end that it met.
The horrifying way that
it was real bad. Bond's a mean person.
Also, they portray it in this movie that, like, being bitten by a snake is, like
insta-death.
Yeah. Like, assassin's dart is, it hits you and you go, hurt, and then just dead.
Yep.
And which is always funny to me when they do stuff like that, where it needs to kill him in a second so that people understand how bad it is.
Yeah, because otherwise people wouldn't know.
Yeah.
So the snakes are very monstery and threatening. They're not
behaving particularly, like, they don't try to make it seem like they're particularly aggressive, but just that they are like almost like they're a biohazard. That it's just
right. Here's a dangerous thing.
Yeah, they're in the room, which means you are this close to death because you're this close to that snake.
Now, I will say, while, again, like the alligator situation, while you are using non-venomous snakes to imply venomous dangers, I do appreciate why you would do that.
Mm-hmm.
No, you shouldn't. I would be more incensed if they had actually had a guy holding like a copperhead.
Yeah.
Like, no, don't do that.
Yes.
That's terrible.
Why is that on set? You pay people to remove those from where you film.
Now, there are 2 other appearances in other movies where we do see cobras.
Yes.
Actual venomous snakes. One, again, in Octopussy.
Mm-hmm.
There's cobras in baskets doing the thing.
Yeah.
And in Casino Royale, the 2006 one that we watched, there's a scene where a bunch of people are like, it's like an animal fighting pit.
They're gambling on a cobra versus a mongoose. Which, boo on you for showing animal fighting as a gambling sport. Yeah.
But you chose a good pair.
Yep, you're accurate to your area. And I know, once again, this isn't a podcast on the cultural representation of it, but I know that that's a real thing. Like,
right.
Mongoose cobra fights are a thing that I don't know if it still happens, but has happened.
Right.
Like, that was a sport. So, like, it's kind of funny that the one snake you have that is probably the most visually impressive of all the venomous snakes, and actually a scary venomous snake.
The most dangerous snake we've seen in the films.
You don't use either time to threaten Bond.
No.
Both times a cobra shows up, it is either just a scene thing, or it is actually in the most danger. Like,
yeah, it's fighting a mongoose.
That's not where it should be.
There was a snake that crawled on Bond in Octopussy for like a moment,
yeah.
And I think that was a cobra.
It's when he's having his jungle montage and he's just bumping into stuff.
See, yeah, we're gonna bring this movie up a bunch of times.
And yeah, one just like goes over his leg, and I think he just tells it to shoo or something. He chastises the snake.
Yeah, he does.
and it kicks it away.
Then there are two other films where we see pythons show up.
Yeah.
And they are used in ways that are, for the movie, fairly reasonable.
Yeah.
One, the most impressive one, is in Moonraker.
Mm-hmm.
There is a scene where Bond goes to the villain's lair, because that's what Bond does, and he is pushed into the water.
With a prop stone.
And then a snake comes out, a big python, and I think it's called a python.
Yeah, he says... my python. He refers to it as my python.
And then Bond wrestles with it for a bit while it tries to constrict him while he's in the water. Now, they used a real snake for it, although the scenes where Bond is wrestling it, it appears to be, in some cases, very obviously fake.
Yes, which is good.
Yes, don't wrestle a python.
Because, as we'll get to later, that is not always the case in these movies.
No, it's not. The python they used in that scene appears to be a reticulated python.
As best as we could ID it from the shots in the internet. Yeah.
Which, good choice.
That's awesome.
That is an actual dangerous snake.
Mm-hmm.
You chose correctly for what the snake would be.
And it was actually a neat scene because... there are scenes underwater with the snake as it's swimming over to Bond that are real clips of a snake swimming.
Yes.
And then as soon as it gets over to him, at which point it switches from being real to fake, it's hard to say for sure, but most of the scenes where it's with him, it is a rubber snake.
Yeah, it's a dummy snake.
But it's actually a fun scene just because you get to see a reticulated python swim around.
Now, I don't know how often reticulated pythons are actually hunting in the water. That's a very anaconda thing to do, and I don't know that reticulated pythons do it much. But props to you for using a snake that actually is known in real life to attack people.
Yeah.
Unlike, king snakes. And then...
the other one's a weird one.
The last... You know what? The last one is probably the most realistic use of a snake.
That's the reason. It is by far the most reasonable... but it's reasonable for a very weird reason.
So in Never Say Never Again, the quote-unquote unofficial Bond film, or semi-official, non-Eon, there is a bad lady who has a snake. That's how you know she's bad.
Yep.
She has a pet snake. She kisses it and stuff.
Yeah.
Which, don't do that. And she uses it to take out a target.
Yeah.
And the way that she does it is that they're both driving, and she has the snake, which is a ball python, it looks like, and she throws it from her car into his car, and it lands in... Does it land in his lap?
I don't think we actually see it land on him.
It lands in the front seat.
We see her throw it, and then I think we see him react.
And he freaks out and drives off the road and crashes and dies.
Yep.
The snake is okay.
Which is the important part.
She gets the snake back, and she kisses it and tells it did a good job. That, I think, is... one of the most realistic ways to kill a target with a snake.
Yep.
That is a realistic way that a person might react to having a snake thrown through their window. So, if you're going to kill someone using a ball python, that's the way to do it.
That's the only way
the only way to do it. Unless you use it like a garrote.
Yeah,
wire,
exactly.
Which you shouldn't do. That's mean to the snake. Throwing it into a crashing car was a very mean thing to do.
No, there's no way that's kind to the snake to kill someone with a ball python.
No, there's no way that's kind to the snake, regardless of the snake, to kill someone with a snake.
True.
Because it's going to get stomped or something.
Yeah.
Although I guess in Live and Let Die, they tied up their sacrifices. And then, I guess there's a way
they
to
were
do
being fairly conscious of the safety of their snakes until one of them fell on a pile of them.
Yeah, well, it wasn't his fault. He was pushed.
Yeah, but they still did it in the movie.
So there are snakes in several of the movies. There are also lizards in a bunch of the movies.
Yeah, more squamates.
More squamates. So this is a good franchise. There are a couple that are just quick appearances.
Yeah, we're showing you a lizard so that you remember where you are.
There's a gecko on a window in Spectre. There's what looked like an iguana or something. It goes by real quick in the desert in Quantum of Solace. There is a notable iguana in License to Kill. It's the pet of the bad guy. That's how you know he's a bad guy.
Yeah.
Because he has a reptile pet.
Because he's cold-blooded.
Because he's just, and his girlfriend doesn't like it because she's bad too. But the most interesting of the lizard appearances is in Skyfall.
Yes.
Where there is a pit of Komodo dragons.
At this, really, really upscaled casino.
Where they could afford Komodo dragons.
As you're entering the casino, you go over a bridge over a Komodo dragon habitat.
Yes.
And it's supposed to be that, like, it's like when you walk across the bridge over an alligator habitat, at a place. It's supposed to be that sort of thing.
Now, the habitat, cool idea.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome to see Komodo dragons show any kind of monitor in a movie. But poorly constructed habitat because there's no roof, which means that when a fight starts, Bond and one of the dudes fall into the habitat, which is dangerous for your animals.
Yes.
Now, this part becomes interesting because so often the animals are an active threat.
Yeah.
Like, here is a snake. That's what you need to be worried about. It's the bad guy. These Crocs are the bad guys. Even though they're
your
acting,
problem.
Yeah,
here.
That's the problem. This scene becomes Bond and the dude fight each other with the environmental hazard of Komodo dragons.
Yeah.
And then one of them bites the dude, which is a Komodo dragon thing to do.
Like,
I would imagine.
This is, once again, an animal that has been documented to kill people. Like, people have died at the teeth of Komodo dragons.
And then it drags him off into the corner, which I don't know that that's a very Komodo dragon thing to do. I honestly don't know. But then my favorite part is that the other Komodo dragon in the habitat, instead of attacking the still standing human, runs over to join the first one with its meal.
Yeah, like when the scene, like after the other one grabs it, you see the other one start to rush out, and it feels like it's about to be, and now it's your turn to deal with the animal's Bond, which is what most movies would do. Like,
right now
we've shown to fight one. Yeah, we've shown the animal is scary by having it kill a henchman. The Ranker killed the Gamorrean guard so that we could see how dangerous it was.
Yeah, so now you're worried for Luke.
Yep. But it's not. It runs past him to go get the easy meal that's being mangled.
Yeah, because they're gregarious feeders.
Yes.
They'll gather around a carcass and eat it.
So once again, like, it's still movie-ified in that it like very slowly, suspensefully approaches the bad guy, and then it drags him off into the dark for ambiance.
Yeah, for scariness.
But all in all, if you told me that you'd seen a Komodo dragon do something like that, it makes sense.
I'd believe it.
Because Komodo dragons are big, dangerous lizards that regularly hunt things human-sized.
So this is an example of cool animals being shown fairly reasonably and not mistreated. Yeah. It doesn't look like they're ever in the scene with a person, like, side by side.
No,
the way the Crocs were. I think they're doing some movie magic.
And I think in most of the scenes it's CG.
That's true.
Most of the scenes with the Komodos look CG. Whilst, as you said, the Crocs and Gators in Live and Let Die were legitimately there. And there are definitely a couple of moments.
It was the early 70s.
Yes.
They did not CG in the Crocs.
Like, and there are definitely people right next to them. Like, there's a shot of Bond on the island with gators in the water.
Yes.
And it's like, yeah, no, that's what's happening.
So, plenty of reptile representation. No turtles. Yeah. Actually, that's not true. We saw a sea turtle.
True.
In like a environmental shot at one point.
We also see a scene where a sea turtle is being ridden by one of the characters in For Your Eyes Only.
That's right.
Oh, no. It was in Thunderball.
Where I was going to say, I think that's Thunderball.
And
don't
do that.
Don't do that. Don't ride sea turtles.
Terrible.
But there's lots of other tetrapods. There are many movies that feature birds.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they're just birds.
Yeah, they don't do anything with any of the birds, really. Like,
there's a cool parrot who gives away the bad guys a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then in Never Say Never Again, there were vultures.
Yeah.
Which was a cool thing. Because, like, we see parrots, we see crows. There's a scene in Moonraker where they're hunting pheasants. Which are like, okay, yeah, no, there's birds. There's pigeons in a bunch of the films.
Yeah.
But vultures, like, they went out and got some vultures to stock this. The vultures don't do anything.
Yeah, they never do anything with it. And I'm almost kind of surprised we didn't get a moment with a guy who was like, my assassin eagle. Like, I'm going to send my hawk to go peck Bond's eyes out as he climbs this mountain or something.
Or like the snakes and the lizards, like someone ends up locked in the room and the vultures attack him to take him down or something.
I thought we were going to see like that the vultures were picking at the people in the dungeon.
They're definitely there to be scary. Even though vultures are not at all scary birds.
Not particularly.
Like, what's a vulture going to do?
Like, I don't want to be bitten by one, but
no,
I don't know why. If I got bitten by a vulture, I assume I deserved it.
I guess the vultures are there to signify that this is a place of death.
That's
like the dungeon.
That's what I got from it.
But there's no dead stuff. It's just vultures.
Yeah. As I got that, it's insinuated people die here.
Then there's a bunch of domesticated animals that show up, which are automatically less interesting from like an animal representation, like a wild animal representation, because you can make a domesticated animal do whatever you want.
Yep, because we designed them that way.
There are a couple of moments of note. So horses and camels are very common in these movies. There is a scene in Never Say Never Again where they have the characters ride a horse off of it's not a cliff, it's a building.
Yeah, like the
fort. Roof into the water, and what appears to be a scene where they dropped a horse into water.
Yep.
That sure looked like they dropped a horse into water.
Where they did that thing. And horses are great swimmers, but don't do that.
This one, I think it landed upside down.
Like, it lands like, it looks very much like it did the whole thing of jumping forward and like back in flips over the front end.
Front flip for style.
Yeah, it's not good.
No, there are a bunch of dogs, mostly as like momentary background things.
Yeah.
There is a sequence in Moonraker where the bad guy has his attack dogs.
His hunting dogs.
Rottweilers or...
I think so.
Dober, something like that. I think they're Rottweilers. And he sends them after a minion who has betrayed him. And that's an interesting scene because it's a like suspenseful...
Kind of horrifying.
You're being chased by monsters. And it would totally fit the characterization of a monsterified scene if they weren't dogs.
Yeah.
Because No, that's a thing that dogs do.
Well, that scene in Django Unchained is in there for a reason.
Yeah, like it was an interesting moment to have a monstery animal scene where it's like, no, yeah, you could get a dog to do that.
There are dogs that are that have been specifically bred and trained to do this thing.
Domesticants are also less interesting for the context of this film because I'm rarely concerned, particularly with stuff like dogs, at how they're being treated. Mm-hmm. Like that horse was obviously, don't do that.
And I think I remember there are a couple of scenes of like, the horses, the Western scene of a horse falling down due to gunshot.
Oh, yeah.
And a couple of those don't look like we've trained the horse to do this. It is we've put the old style they used to do that in movies, for anyone out there who doesn't know, is they put cords around the horse's feet and pull.
Yeah.
And that's how you got a horse to fall down in a war movie. And it's horrifying.
So not great. But those attack dogs, there's no evidence in the film to suggest that they weren't loved on by everybody on set.
Yeah, they were probably having a great time.
They were probably doing great. These movies did not have the thing at the end of the credits that says no animals. Well, actually, I don't know when that... we weren't looking to see when that started.
No, yeah, we didn't keep up. I do know that...
That would have been cool to look for.
At least to my knowledge. Correct me if I'm wrong out there, anyone. But that started because of Milo and Otis. So any movies before Milo and Otis wouldn't have had that. And then Milo and Otis killed so many puppies and kittens that the animals' rights came into film.
So Milo and Otis was in 1986. And I have my phone, so I looked it up. And so that would suggest that everything, basically Dalton onwards, should have... And actually, that pretty much tracks.
Because... once you get to that point...
once you're done with more...
Yep. Significantly fewer questionable animal scenes and many more fake animals in the movies from that point on.
Yep.
So it actually makes a lot of sense if you... with that date in mind.
There are a handful of other tetrapods of note. Just quick notes. There is, in Octopussy, there's a circus.
Yep.
So we see a chimpanzee that someone's holding, which... don't do that.
No.
I assume that was like a trained person. No, it's there for a moment.
And young chimpanzees like handler, if you've ever watched the documentaries where they are fostering orphan chimps and things like that. Like that you do carry them that way, but anything bigger than a young chimp.
PSA for our listeners. Don't pick up chimps.
Yes, like that's not something you want to be doing.
And then there's a couple of tigers in this movie. One is when Bond's doing his running through the jungle and encountering all the things.
Yeah.
There's a moment where a tiger, like full-on adult tiger, walks out of the woods and like growls at him or whatever, and Bond tells it to sit, and it does.
Yep.
And then he leaves. Because
cats are dogs.
I guess, because even tigers are dogs. And then the other tiger appearance is there's very quick moment when they're in the circus where someone is like passing around a baby tiger.
Yes. And this is something that like, that's something you can go to places to do today, is get pictures with like baby cubs of exotic cats. Don't do that.
No.
That's bad. That there's no guarantee that every place is doing that incorrectly, but there is a very bad background to that practice.
It is generally a good idea. A general good rule is if you're not trained to hold a baby animal, you shouldn't be holding a baby animal. So yeah.
Well, and like
and now it was a circus, so yeah, our expectations can only be so high.
But to give an example, like when I worked at the aquarium, we would do interactions with animals and bring them over to guests, but at no point did the guest ever hold the animal.
No.
It was, I would let them touch the animal in a very specific, controlled way, and if they broke that rule, they didn't get to touch the animal anymore.
2 fingers on the back.
And usually, if they broke the rule too egregiously, no one got to touch the animal anymore.
Yep. Animal goes away.
I would go, all right, animal's going back up, because that was too much.
I would do that when I was at the nature center up in New York. Like, yeah, if you grab the snake's tail, snake goes away.
Yes.
Because
that's not fair to the snake for me to just allow people to do that. So the commercial just holding of exotic animals is not great.
There are also a few elephants in the franchise. There's the elephants at the circus, and there's elephants being ridden by people, because India. And then there's an elephant in The Man with the Golden Gun that is mischievously messing with Sergeant J.W. Pepper.
Yeah.
Who is in the movie.
Yeah, it's just a little baby elephant that's there for him to be, quote-unquote, funny with.
Which is another one, like the dogs, where I'm like, I bet that elephant was having a grand old time.
Yeah.
Because I don't know much about elephant movie training and stuff.
I don't either.
But you can train elephants, and so I hope at least that the elephant was having a good time. There are a bunch of monkeys in the living daylights. Macaques running around, which was pretty cool. And then, moving back into some more substantial things, some more monstery things, there's a bunch of arthropods.
Yeah, some inverts.
Invertebrates, which are almost invariably shown as scary, bad, monstery, no good creatures.
And mostly arachnids.
Mostly arachnids. So we see, in fact, I think it's all arachnids. We see a couple of spider moments. In Dr. No, way back in the start.
Yeah.
Like the snake in Live and Let Die, a tarantula is left in his room, his hotel room, to, I guess, go after him and murder him in the night.
Well, and it's the way these scenes are often treated is the idea that, like, if a spider is left in the room with a human, it is inevitable that said spider will bite said human.
Right.
Like, that's what happens when humans and spiders are in proximity to each other.
That's what spiders do.
That's why we're all being bitten by spiders constantly.
All the time.
Right now.
I think they leave it in his bed.
Yeah.
So that it, like, it's a very, like, scary scene where it's crawling under the sheets and up onto him and stuff. And it's following in that trend, like with the snakes, where it's like, there is one of these here, and thus everyone is in danger.
Yep.
So it's spiders getting a bad rap. Octopussy has a quick moment where Bond, when he's doing his jungle safari, runs through a spider web, and there's like a serial killer musical note. Yeah, like, oh no! And he has to, like, get rid of the spider, and it...
They don't even... I don't even think they show a spider. It's just...
I think you maybe see it for a second.
Yeah. But they do that in movies all the time where it's like, there's a web, you know, so surely the spider is waiting to catch you.
Yeah. And it's a scary... Oh, there was a tiger. Scary. There was a cobra. Scary. There's a spider in a web. And it's a lot of, like, quick, cheap monstery animal moments.
Yeah.
And then we have a bunch of scorpion appearances.
Which are slightly more reasonable than the spiders.
So there is a scene in Diamonds Are Forever where the bad guys drop a scorpion down a guy's shirt.
Yep.
Which is that feels like a prank you pull on somebody to drop a bug in their shirt.
Yes.
Less than a murderous.
And super villainy.
And that's another one where it's in your shirt. Obviously it will sting you. Which, it's a disturbed.
Fair enough. I would kind of be surprised if I didn't get stung by a scorpion that just got dropped down the back of my shirt.
Agreed. And then the guy does the same thing that you were describing with the snakes in Live and Let Die.
Ah!
And then
Ugh.
dies instantly. He seizes up and then dies.
And it's not to say that there aren't snakes and there aren't scorpions that are incredibly deadly. Because there are.
Yep.
There are.
Don't know what kind of scorpion that was.
I couldn't tell.
No.
So for there are absolutely members of both of those groups that are known to cause death, some within less than a day.
Oh, yeah. It'll work pretty quick.
If you're not a few hours from a hospital, you're probably not going to make it. But within seconds...
Insta-death is a very monstery trait.
Yeah, there's not much... There's not a lot of venomous things out there that quite have that effect on people.
Yeah. So this is... we mentioned this in the episodes very often, but this trend of monsterifying animals, giving them traits that don't really make sense, but help them feel scary and movie-y.
They don't make sense, but they make good film.
Yes. There is a whole sequence in Die Another Day where scorpions are implied to be used for torture.
Yeah, and in that one it's almost suggested that kind of like if anyone remembers the bee sting therapy where they would have a bee and put it up against someone's skin to trigger some of the immune system responses. I don't know if there's any validity to bee sting therapy, but they would just take a bee and kind of press it against you.
Yeah.
And the bee would respond by stinging because it was being pressed against something. That's always kind of what I took from that scene, is not that they were like, we're going to leave scorpions in your dungeon, but we are torturing you.
Right.
And I'm going to strap you to this chair and take a scorpion and push it against your arm.
And I think they said that they would inject him and then give him anti-venom. Over and over again as a torture thing.
So you get the pain of the sting, but it's not going to kill you.
It's the scorpions aren't actually doing anything, so it's certainly a reasonable thing for humans to do.
Yeah, and once again, that's okay.
And it makes for a cool opening sequence. And then there is a scorpion that makes an appearance in Skyfall, where Bond's doing the drinking challenge.
He's drinking a shot of some liquor with a scorpion sitting on his drinking hand.
Yep.
And he's having to take the drink without disturbing the scorpion enough to get stung.
Which is actually kind of a cool way to display a scorpion, because that's an irresponsible thing to do.
No, dumb thing.
But the scorpion is, it's not dangerous unless you're really bugging it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, don't go picking up scorpions.
No. And
but you could, and you'd probably be okay, because they're not just trying to kill everybody.
Yes. And the other thing I liked about that one is, I don't know a lot about scorpions, but I do know that on average, claw size gives you a slight indication to venom. Not always, not completely. But emperor scorpions have big meaty claws and not terrible venom because they use their claws to tear things apart.
Right. While
really delicate clawed scorpions can oft times, once again, I don't know that this is as average as it's often made out to be, but oft times have more potent venom because they need to kill their prey. It's like box jellyfish have incredibly potent venom because their tentacles are so delicate. If the fish struggles at all, it tears them apart. So it was a teeny tiny scorpion, so I assume that getting stung by that one would not be good.
Yeah.
Getting stung by an emperor scorpion, you'd be uncomfortable. This one would have... There was reason for there to be tension.
Yeah.
And once again, though, it was a CG scorpion, so...
Yeah, and then once... at that point, we're in the 2000s.
Yeah.
And it's... Yeah, they're CGing it.
All animals but the horses and dogs.
Yeah, right? And then... we will move into what is sort of the final extended section of this episode, which is stuff in the water.
Because, man, do these movies spend a lot of time in the water.
There are tons of fish in this franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Like, usually they're, like when we're in the, because like you said, for whatever reason, this franchise really likes putting scenes underwater.
Well, because you're not a secret agent if you don't put on scuba gear at least once a mission.
Everyone loves a water level. And so oftentimes it's like, here's some fish, here's a manta ray, here. There is a scene where Bond has like a manta ray suit.
Yes.
So that he can hide from the bad guys.
I forgot about that.
Yep. I forget which one that was in, but that was very funny. But then there's also this trend of bad guys having aquaria.
Yes.
Like Dr. No has an aquarium. Blofeld has an aquarium in From Russia with Love. There was Octopussy has an aquarium. I think Stromberg in The Spy Who Loved Me. A bunch of bad guys have aquariums, which is weird because I get it with like, this bad guy has a lizard. He must be a bad dude.
Yeah, he must be a weirdo.
Are fish a weird? Like, maybe it's an extravagance thing.
Maybe it's an extravagance thing, or maybe it's like a smart people have aquariums. I feel like
a sophistication
thing that it's like, look how fancy my living. Because I mean, extravagance and sophistication is not a terrible, like, if you have for anyone out there who owns aquariums, you can probably attest, if you have a really nice, really big aquarium, you put some money into that.
Right.
Like, you can't keep...
It's a class symbol.
It can't, and it's often used that way. And I think that's probably what it's supposed to be, is to show that I'm of the upper crust. And is often when they're trying to show the villain as because they often conflate that with being an intellectual as well. Like,
yes.
I am high society in all regards.
Sometimes they're used metaphorically. Like Dr. No has the fish magnified to make them look bigger. Blofeld has Siamese fighting fish.
Yep.
And he has some sort of speech about them fighting or whatever. Also, it's in my notes, the fake Manta Ray was in License to Kill.
Oh, yeah.
Which is also one of the 2 films where the fish are antagonists.
Yes.
In License to Kill, there's this whole thing where there's a bunch of aquarium tanks in the bad guy's place, and one of them has electric eels in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so someone gets pushed into it.
Which, he's at like a on-the-coast fish breeder, and at least to me, highly suggested to be like saltwater stuff. Just so everyone knows, electric eels are not eels. They do not live in the ocean. They are a cousin of the knife fish, and they live in the Amazon and nowhere else. And they're the only electric eel. No other eels do that, because they're not eels. So
either this guy had like a specific Amazonian tank.
Yes.
Or they're making stuff up.
And that's why I always love when they're like, there are electric eels here. It's like, really?
Yeah, why?
Because that's not like an easy fish to come upon.
No.
Like,
speaking of Amazonian fish, the other scene where fish are villainous is in You Only Live Twice. Blofeld has a pool of piranhas.
Yeah.
Which we don't actually see.
No. It's Alka-Seltzer piranhas.
Yeah, we are told he has a pool of piranhas.
And then bubbles kill people.
They do the piranha trope, which is a person falls in and they are instantly surrounded by froth and bubbles, and then they're dead.
Well, and the thing that I love also is I think in one scene you see like the path of the bubbles come to them. And what I always love whenever they suggest that with piranhas is, the frothing water of them just going rabid on something. And then when you see the bubbles travel, it's like, are the piranhas just going through empty water?
Well, they're exhaling.
It's just like
as they're surfacing, they're exhaling slowly as they come to the surface. They know how to do it.
Well, they're just eating each other on the way to the bigger meal, and hopefully there's enough of us.
They're finishing their last meal. And that's another one that is like, that is a very movie trope, the whole thing of a swarm of piranhas cleaning a skeleton or whatever.
Yeah.
And they are hungry fish.
Well, it's not that there isn't potential danger.
It's like the scorpion and the snake, where if you're in the water, you will die.
Well, and the thing that I've always found funny about the perception that piranhas are this swarm thing of like, we will take down anything that falls in the water. Well, then wouldn't they eat everything in the Amazon. Like,
Yeah.
if a school of piranhas can take down something the size of a human, then that includes things the size of a jaguar, and things the size of a caiman, and things the size of giant Amazonian fish. Like, how would anything compete with them if that's how they worked? And that's not how... They don't work as a swarm.
No.
They find food, and then they all fight over it.
So no fish were harmed in the making of that movie, at the very least. A few other water creatures. Octopussy has a blue-ringed octopus in her aquarium.
Which, cool thing to include.
Cool. She also has her bathrobe.
Yeah.
Or I guess her robe. Her robe has the octopus on it.
And I think she has a tattoo of it.
The other lady had a tattoo.
That's what it was.
I forget her name, but the circus lady had this little tattoo on her.
Mm-hmm.
The octopus is very much fake.
Very fake.
It looks like. And then, because it's a dangerous animal, because they're very venomous.
Yeah, so all octopuses have venomous saliva, at least all that I'm aware of. I'm sure there are some that are exception. But they have venomous saliva to paralyze their prey. The blue-ringed, as far as we know, is the only one with venom strong enough that it uses it as a defense mechanism.
And I think it's implied somewhere in the movie that they're using the venom. They're like taking the venom for use as poison or whatever.
Yeah, they're milking the octopus, I
guess. And then there's a fight scene and some guy gets his face shoved into the aquarium.
Yeah, the aquarium breaks, and as the water rushes onto him...
Oh, that's right.
There is just suddenly an octopus face-huggered to his face.
Yep.
Just...
Octopussy, there's also a leech that Bond burns off.
Yeah.
That he gets Do you burn off leeches?
I don't know that wouldn't work, but as far as I know, that's not like the suggested method.
Well, he's Bond.
But I mean, fine. I don't know.
And then the other ocean thing that stuck out to us when we were watching it is that, because we're always on the lookout for animals being mistreated.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, because that kind of stands out. There is a scene in For Your Eyes Only where two of the characters are being dragged behind a boat.
Yep.
Like, they're in the water and they're being dragged behind the boat. And the animal that's being mistreated in this sequence is coral.
And it's supposed to be like if anyone out there's seen Moana, it's supposed to be like that where like you're getting, the coral is a hazard. It's sharp and it's dangerous and you don't want to get caught in the waves next to it. It's supposed to, that's what they're trying to do, is they're in danger of being cut up by this coral.
Right. And yeah, they're being dragged across. So it's like rocks. It's like, oh no, you're going to get hurt on the rocks.
But they're like, as far as we could tell, actually smashing coral.
It did look like actual coral.
Like,
maybe they made fakes.
Maybe they did. But
this was also, what movie did I say this was? For Your Eyes Only?
Mm-hmm.
The early 80s? So like, maybe you were responsible?
But if not...
Oh, you jerks.
No, don't do that.
Don't break coral.
That's bad.
Haven't they suffered enough?
God. I had like a minor...
Yeah, that was, every now and then there'd be an animal moment where we would both be like, ooh, no.
It's like, I don't like this movie anymore.
My immersion is broken because you heard a thing. Well, speaking of animals that elicited a reaction out of us, there is only one category of animal left for us to touch on, and it is the animal group that is used by far the most often in prominent roles.
Yep.
And that is sharks.
Yeah, sharks are all over the place in this franchise, being used all the ways you'd expect sharks to be used.
I have sharks listed for, I think, 5 or 6 different movies in the franchise. Because, again, we're in the water all the time.
Yep.
Most notably in 1965's Thunderball.
This is the famous one that actually uses it, with a villain-kept shark tank.
Yeah, so he has, like, this pool where his sharks live and where he can push people into and then connect the two pools and the sharks will come in and attack them.
Yep.
So what stands out to you with the sharks, Will?
Oh my gosh. Everything. The first thing that stood out to me watching this movie is that these are live sharks that they are filling with. The actors are in the water with the sharks.
Yep. And I read like some of the production stuff like behind the scenes, and yeah, no, like Sean Connery was in the water with the sharks.
And they're tiger sharks.
They are tiger sharks. They didn't get like nurse sharks to stand in as sharks.
It's unlike the crocodile situation where it's like, yeah, we'll get some like, we'll get an easy to use safe animal and just pretend it's the scary one.
Right, get an American alligator or get a king snake and it's not going to do anything.
No, you got tiger sharks, and most of the sharks in most of the Bond movies are tiger sharks. And the reason I'm freaking out for anyone who's unfamiliar with tiger sharks are one of the larger predatory sharks alive today. They range up to sizes of not quite great white, but in the mid-teens is the upper reaches of how big tiger sharks typically get. They are the sharks that are called the garbage cans of the sea. They eat basically anything. They're often
license plates and stuff.
Famous for eating scrap metal, because metal puts off enough of electrical charge in salt water that it attracts sharks' attention. But they also are the ones with chainsaw teeth because they bite through turtle shells.
Yeah.
Like, these are the shark, I think it's second to great whites. Though it may be third after bull shark. I'd have to double check. But for human attacks, they are toward the top of the list.
So putting your actors alongside these sharks is not only dangerous for the sharks, like you shouldn't be doing that, but no, those are actually dangerous sharks.
That's like, we're going to do a scene with a lion. Now, I did some research because I was utterly baffled.
Yep.
And tiger sharks, though higher on the list for fatal attacks because of the devastation of their bite, are not particularly high energy aggressive sharks. They're very slow swimming cruising sharks compared to your great white, which is more like a torpedo. And they're very common. I did not realize how common tiger sharks were globally. And so they're very easy to come by.
Yeah, it might be that they're easy to catch, and that since they're relatively calm, it's. I think when we talked about it, the comparison we made is like, well, it's like an alligator.
Yes,
like that is a fairly docile,
dangerous animal.
Yeah, if you do get bitten, you are in trouble.
You're going to the hospital.
Like a tiger shark is like, well, it's like the most dangerous dogs.
Yes,
or it's like, yeah, and oftentimes it's not that the dog doesn't have to be aggressive. It's just we made a dog that is meant to do lots of damage.
Yeah, exactly. With a particularly powerful bite or something. And so it's less unreasonable than my initial reaction, but still like actual and not itty, like you'd expect there to be a camera trick of like, we're going to shoot a 2-foot, 3-foot tiger shark and make it look big. No, there are scenes where it's like, that person is next to a 5 to 6 foot tiger shark.
That is a Bond-sized tiger shark.
That is a fatal tiger shark. That is something that could kill you.
So throughout the movies, there's a bunch of shark tropes. So the sharks are often used, like there are a handful of times where people are fed to sharks.
Yep.
But then there's also a bunch of times where sharks are just like the vultures. Mm-hmm. They're there to tell you that there's danger.
Yes, it's that we're swimming through this wreckage and then a shark shows up and I have to figure out how to get around this shark.
Right. It is a dangerous... I think there's at least one sequence in one of them where there were just sharks around for a while and they didn't do anything. It's just, no, it's just there's danger.
Yep.
There are a few moments. So Thunderball does this, and then I think For Your Eyes Only did this, where they do the sharks come after blood thing.
Yep.
Where someone gets cut, and now it's, oh, now the tension is high.
Yep, now the sharks are on their way. It's a matter of time.
Because the sharks didn't notice you
yes,
until you started bleeding.
And just in case anyone, I don't know if I said this on the shark episode, but...
You said this in one of our mini rants at the end of one of these episodes.
It might have been Meg.
It might have been, yeah, I think it was the Meg.
Yeah, it might have been Meg. But of course sharks can smell your blood, but it doesn't smell like fish blood. So they may be interested, but sharks don't just go into feeding frenzies when there's food.
No.
That's not how it works.
This franchise does that a couple times. Mm-hmm. The shark says super scary things. There are a handful of times where a bad guy has sharks, just to be intimidating. In License to Kill was the only time, I think, that they have a scene where sharks are attacking someone, but we notice that there are fake sharks.
Yeah, fake shark is the one doing it. There's real sharks in establishing shots.
Yes.
Fake sharks doing the attacking.
Right, so that you don't have a person in the water with the shark.
Yes, which is better.
And then there are a few moments, emblematic of the treatment of sharks.
Yes.
So they're in Never Say Never Again. There's the scene where, you know, they're in the wreckage and Bond's being chased by the shark, and he's like pushing stuff at it to stop it coming after him.
Mm-hmm.
So he like closes the door on the shark, and then the mast or something? The mast of the boat like tips over and falls to stop the shark, and that's cool and all, but by all appearances, they just actually closed a door on a shark and dropped a log on a shark.
And with a log on a shark, the shark was actually pinned. Like, you can see it gasping to breathe. It is opening its mouth trying to pump water, and it is just a shark that they've pinned down.
Yeah.
It's really bad.
Oh, no. And so that was, what did I say? That was Never Say Never Again. 83. So a few years before Milo and Otis. But then probably the worst one, I think the worst moment in the franchise, animal-wise, for us, is in Thunderball.
Thunderball has a couple of moments that are real rough. One of them is during a big underwater fight. I think Bond, but maybe someone else, shoots a shark with a spear gun to like ward it off while they're out in the ocean. And unless they use some very clever camera play, actually shot a shark with a spear gun.
It looks like they actually just shot a shark with a spear gun.
And considering the background for this movie is that they went out with rods, caught tiger sharks, brought them into pens where they were tied up, because if they can't swim much, they get lethargic because, you know, they're not breathing.
Yeah.
And then you would take the shark and aim it in the direction you wanted the shot to be, and you'd let it go, and then for the most part, those sharks just swam back out into the ocean, because that's how you did movies back then.
So this shark is swimming along. It doesn't look like it's not like it dies.
No,
it gets speared
hit
through
in the side and jolts and then keeps swimming.
And it reacts to it. And like ouch, and then keeps swimming. Like, you shot a shark in your movie.
But then
this was 1965.
Yes, very before Milo and Otis. But there's another scene where sharks are swimming around and they're needing to dive, and so they take a rifle out and shoot at a couple of them, and then it shows a dead shark.
Yeah.
Now, whether they shot that shark whether that was actually what happened in that scene, or they got a dead shark in some other way, but it was definitely an actual dead shark.
Yeah, that was like a prop.
It was the best prop I've ever seen. And so someone killed a shark and they used it in the movie.
Yeah.
Which I'm not very prone to.
So there's a mixture. It's a very interesting franchise to watch for lots of like cultural reasons and cinematic reasons.
Yes.
And like, it's a trip through time and it's fascinating. But with the animals, it's really interesting to see how treatment of animals changed over time, to see the way the animals are portrayed in the films throughout the franchise.
That's probably what stood out to me the most, because like the fact that they started using fake animals in later movies, or benign animals for whenever they were real, made sense, because like, well, yeah, laws have changed.
Right,
like,
it's the 90s now. You can't shoot a shark on your movie anymore.
You are going to get a talking to. But it also was interesting to me that other than the fake shark and like the Komodo dragons, there's very few instances of antagonistic animals.
Yeah, they're not bad guys very often.
And I wonder how much of that was, well, we can't use the animal, so it's not as exciting, or we don't want to CG it because if it looks bad, it's going to bring down our movie.
Also, that's a lot of money.
And it's expensive. Or, and I am hoping this is a big part of it, is that audiences wouldn't buy one of those shark scenes as in a movie like James Bond. Like, yes, we're still making 47 meters down.
Yeah.
Which is a dumb... If someone out there likes it, fine. You enjoy your movies. But is a dumb, terrible, stupid movie.
We also made The Meg.
Yes. So, like, we're still making stupid... We made Crawl, which, like, yay, alligator, but also, like, you used an alligator? The laziest of the crocodilians? Okay. And also, I love that everyone in that movie pointed out that, like, yeah, you put basements in Florida. This movie is unbelievable.
Right?
So, like, we're still making dumb animal movies, but in a movie that we're supposed to be taking seriously, like a action movie James Bond, or it's supposed to be at least,
There's tension.
tension. This tension is supposed to be there.
Well, I wonder if it's just that audiences are less cool with it, or not gonna buy it,
Or if it feels archaic. Like, I wonder if it feels dated to have a shark, in a villain shark tank.
So maybe certainly the culture around movies has changed, and it is reflected somewhat in the way that they're using their animals, which is pretty cool.
So it's interesting, and it's once again, by no means are the Bond movies in any way attempting to be references for these animals. So
no,
us seemingly being harsh on them is not misplaced interpretation of the films.
Oh no, as always, we are commenting on how movies are using these things.
Yes, because some of them are fun films, even when they do dumb animal stuff.
We're not passing judgment on the films as films. That's what More Thoughts is for.
But it is very interesting to see, especially because a lot of these movies created many of these tropes, or at least made them famous.
They sure. And actually, now that you say that, it occurs to me the one animal that I somehow left off of the list is cats.
Mm-hmm.
This is the film that the franchise that, as far as I can tell, invented the trope of the bad guy menacingly petting his cat.
Yes.
That's Blofeld. That Blofeld has a cat.
So that was really the reason that these were standing out so much to us, is that the Bond franchise, and if someone's a like film historian and is actually Dr. No took a bunch of stuff from other stuff.
Oh, sure.
Let us know. We would love to hear
Yeah,
that.
teach us stuff about Bond.
That would be fascinating. But fame-wise, when we see a lot of those kinds of tropes, they're referencing Bond. So many of these weird movie animal moments that are now cliches in film, kind of trace their origins back to here.
Or at least movies like this.
Yes.
This genre of bad guys who have sharks in their lairs.
Yeah, and often at least feel like they're referencing this. So it was very interesting to see kind of the early versions of that and how it's persisted in movie portrayal of these animals, and therefore a lot of times our perception of the animals.
Now, before we finish the episode, as always, we like to have, like we say, we're not here to nitpick the films. What we're interested in is the sort of broader concepts.
Yeah.
This one's a little more nitpicky because we're talking about individual animals. So typically, we have a section at the end of the episodes, which is our mini rants, which is our opportunity to nitpick something that bugs us about the science. For this one, we're going to nitpick the franchise.
Yes.
So we're going to pick some stuff.
Because if we were wanting to get really specific and nitpick a scene from a movie, that's zooming way too far in.
Will, what is your James Bond mini rant?
Mine is very franchise in the fact that it's not technically specific to the James Bond franchise, but to the people making the franchise. So MGM made the vast bulk of the early Bond movies. And so at the beginning of almost every Bond movie we watched, there is that scene where a lion comes on and roars to signify that MGM helped out.
Yep.
And though they've made other movies than Bond, since we're talking about animals,
we had to endure it.
I feel remiss to mention that that's a tiger roar. It's very much how, like, every time you've almost ever heard an eagle make a noise in a movie, it's actually a hawk.
It's a red-tailed hawk.
Whenever you hear that lion roar at the beginning of MGM movies, it's a tiger. You can go look up the names of the individual lion that was the model and the individual tiger who roared, because lion roars are like, ooh.
Yeah, they're not nearly as impressive as a movie maker wants it to be.
While tiger growls and roars make you poop your pants. So they use that. And I get it. But it's in every movie. It started to bug me.
Every time we had to watch these movies.
So I would tell David, and add another tiger to the list. It was in another one of these movies.
You know, mentioning big carnivores makes me realize, and I hadn't thought about this, animals that we didn't see in the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we didn't see, I think maybe, did we see wolves? I think there was like maybe a scene with wolves, but I don't remember. Like,
no,
wolves,
yeah.
Bears aren't in there?
No.
Some missed opportunities.
Yes.
But that's not my mini rant. My mini rant. So we decided that this episode would be talking about the animals and leaving out the other sciencey subjects for lots of reasons. One, mostly because so we can narrow it down. But I want to touch on the scientists of the Bond franchise, for they are disappointing.
All of them.
There wasn't, like, if you asked us to do a scientist breakdown of this, we'd be hard pressed. Most of the scientists in this franchise are scientists so that the plot has a scientist in it, but they don't do sciencey stuff really. They are either background characters who wear lab coats and stuff.
we assume you're scientists, but we're never introduced to you, so
Or they are bad guys who are mad scientists, very tropey. Or, in several cases, they are a scientist whose scientific credentials are barely touched upon in favor of them being an attractive woman that is in the movie, so that there's an attractive woman in the movie.
And them being a scientist is often the way that they're put in the movie. Like,
yes.
Like script-wise, that's the plot element, but they're not.
Here is a supermodel wearing a lab coat. You're in the movie now.
Yeah.
And then there are a bunch of times where Bond fits into some of the scientist tropes we've talked about.
Yes, he does.
I think this was in The Spy Who Loved Me, where there's a sequence where he's like showing up. He's showing off by knowing a bunch of oddly specific information. Like someone, I don't think it was Q or M, was doing a presentation and they like bring up a chemical formula and Bond's like, oh yes, that's the chemical formula for blood. And then the next scene they bring up this rare orchid, this plant, because they're like, oh, we found evidence of this plant and it only grows in one place, or, you know, we were able to track the bad guy. And they bring it up and Bond's like, well, yes, that orchid that was thought to be extinct, and then they discovered it in this one. Why do you know? Why are you the know-it-all?
Yeah.
You have a character for that.
Yes, exactly.
There is a character who's supposed to be like that. It's weird that you made Bond that trope that we've talked about of the exposition science machine.
Well, and the reason it's super weird to me is because they have lots of moments of Bond just, he always is on point all the time, you know, and he always knows what he needs to know to be impressive. But a lot of times it's like when he's at a casino or when he's like drinking, like he identifies alcohols all the time, or he'll take a sip and then say, you know,
1968, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, blah, 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 yeah, alcohol name.
Yeah.
And that makes complete sense to me because
he's an alcoholic.
Because he's an alcoholic. Like,
well, and because he's a cool guy, and
yeah,
drinking is a cool guy thing to do.
Like, so that makes sense that you would be an expert in that, and it makes sense that you would be an expert in like the casino stuff, because half the scenes where you're like getting close to the bad guy
in a casino all the time
is while playing Baccarat.
Casinos are Bond's favorite terrain.
Yes. And so like,
but why do you know the chemical formula for blood?
And that's the parts, the movies where they do that always are weird to me, because the movies seem to switch between Bond being a lackadaisical agent, where like Q's showing him the new equipment and Bond's like not paying attention.
Yeah, he's
like touching stuff that he's not supposed to be touching, and he's like fiddling with things, and he's making fun of Q, and then 2 scenes later he's like, yes, this scientific concept discovered by this person, known for this. It's like, no, you
stop it.
That's not how that works.
And then the other scientist thing, there's a bunch of them, but the last one that I want to make sure to mention is that a few times, but once very noticeably, this franchise does the hacker thing.
Yeah.
Like, there is a moment where the computery character, this is in Skyfall, says out loud to the camera, he hacked us. But that...
you can't just say that and make it so.
You can't just say words.
Yeah, they have the hacker thing all the time of like...
They're playing like puzzles on the screen, and that's how hacking is supposed to work.
I'm having to type at the speed of code.
Yes. They do all the weird hacker tropes. And that one came out in 2012. You know better than that. You all use computers.
Yeah.
Anyway, this was a delightful journey for us to go on. A weird episode, but we had a lot of fun putting these notes together. As always, we hope that everybody out there is staying safe and staying healthy. We hope you enjoyed our little rantings about animals and Bond. Oftentimes we will get to the end of one of these and recommend a film. So, yeah, no, we recommend at least 6 of these.
Yeah.
If you want to hear more about our non-sciencey thoughts of the franchise, if for patrons we will upload an extra discussion, our more thoughts, where we will go through our more thoughts.
Ooh, strap in.
On the Bond franchise. Oh, it's going to be a lot of fun. I think this might be our last Silver Screen Science for a little while in this current series. We're going to take a little bit of a break, but we are still open to doing more extra content. We're still bouncing some ideas around. So if there are things you'd like to see us do, let us know. As always, give us suggestions and we'll see how we can help you and ourselves fill the time that we are now spending inside distracting ourselves from scary things.
Yeah.
And with that, I think we will end this unusual episode of Silver Screen Science. Stay tuned for more, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Common Descent Podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and check our WordPress blog for pictures and links after each episode. Huge thanks to our patrons whose support helps keep this podcast running and who get access to bonus goodies on Patreon. The song you're hearing is called On the Origin of Species by Protodome, which we found at ocremix.org. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us next time.